p.m. and I will great thanks to so I will call the meeting of the Select Board to order at 6:02 p.m. on a special meeting on September 27th. Roll call: Mr. Allison.
Here.
Ms. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan. Here. I will thank the two members of the Planning Board, at least two, who are on this call, who indicated to us that they could see my lips moving, but they couldn't hear me. We hadn't called the meeting to order yet, but I thank Frank and Kendra for their diligent text messages to inform us. Before we, oh gosh, all kinds of things. Oh, yes, thank you. Before we begin, at the last meeting we had was a joint meeting between the Planning Board and the Select Board. And I was remiss in all the hubbub of appointing remaining members of the Planning Board to acknowledge the passing of a great Lancastrian, someone who has dedicated a great deal of his life to the town, who had served on the Planning Board and been very active in the community, a good friend to many of us, Mark Finnerty, who passed recently. He and his family have committed an awful lot of their time throughout generations now to the town of Lancaster, and he deserves our great thanks for that. May he rest in peace. May his family be comforted by the great memories of Mark that we all share. It was a very tragic day, and I know as they're trying to get through and deal with this unbelievable loss, I just want them to know that the town of Lancaster stands with them and behind them, and we wish them well and hope that that Mark is resting in peace and that they find some peace in knowing that. So I don't know if anyone, I know you knew Mark well. I don't know if you wanted, I should have, I popped this on you, I apologize.
No, I did know Mark well, but your words summed it up. They were, it's very thoughtful and well-spoken. His service is next week. It's October 13th at the First Church right here on the Green, and everyone is invited.
Do you know what time of day it is?
It's evening, I think it's 4 o'clock, followed by light refreshments, as Mark would have appreciated. He loved the light refreshments. He loved lots of light refreshments, yes. Right? But he rode them off on his bike. So if you haven't seen him riding his bike, that's how many people have been asking, and I just don't think people knew. And thank you, Suki, because he really did help shape our town for the better.
So we thank you, Mark, and Natasha and the family. We send our love. With that, we'll begin. Oh, sorry.
Meeting's being recorded?
Yes. Oh, sorry. The meeting is being recorded. Everyone should know that. And broadcast on Sterling-Lancaster television. Thank you. I'm going to eventually, in my...
We had an open meeting law complaint about that.
About me not saying that it's being recorded?
Well,
I mean, it is at the top of every agenda.
But no, it's a Zoom meeting. I was educated by our wonderful lawyers.
Ah.
You have to announce that the meeting is being recorded.
Well, consider it announced.
There's that guy from Alabama. Remember that guy?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Hey, he knows his stuff. And he's educated me, and I'm better for it.
That sounds fantastic. The meeting is still being recorded, but thank you. All right, approval of minutes is the next item up on the agenda. There are meeting minutes for September the 12th. Is there a motion?
I'll offer a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of Monday, September 12th, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Mrs. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan? Aye, 3-0. Thank you very much. Scheduled appearances, we have none. Board, committees and department reports, we have none. Public comment, as is the case, if you have a question, there's only one person in the room and we're going to be speaking to you, Kelly, in a few minutes. If there's anybody on Zoom who would like to throw up their virtual hand, we'll call on you and you would get 4 minutes for public comment. As is the case with the Select Board, we will tolerate constructive and helpful and positive comments, nothing that attacks folks or goes in a negative direction. We will, at the rule of the chair, reserve the right to stop your comment at that point. Kara Sanford, your hand is up. Please state your name and your address.
Okay. Thank you. So Kara Sanford, 350 Gold Hill Road. Thank you for allowing me to express my opinion with this. This is also to my fellow residents watching this stream, hopefully. In 2017, our select board negotiated a settlement with the development partner who was asking for the rezoning on Lunenburg Road. It was a very weak agreement for the residents. All the sand and gravel had been mined off 37 acres of town interest land. This settlement neither asked for nor received any payment for that. Instead, the select board agreed to convey those 37 acres for around $200,000. These 37 acres are now the future site of the proposed warehouse complex. The developer agreed to convey to the town in the settlement a trail easement on one parcel and 86 acres. The land was never delivered. In October 2021, the Capital Group sent the Select Board and Town Administrator a letter stating the settlement was no longer enforceable because the Town Administration had mismanaged the process. To my knowledge, there has been no past or current Select Board willingness to get a third-party legal opinion on this. There is a legal concept called fair dealing. I expect better behavior. Better behavior from our select board to attempt to defend the residents' resources, and better behavior from the developer. There is no sense of fair dealing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara, appreciate it. As I mentioned to you, I think over email, as you know, I'm new to this board, we are looking into make sure that your question gets answered about whether or not there was a separate legal opinion sought, and I will certainly get back to you. My understanding, though, is that, as you pointed out, the agreement lapsed and at the town's lack of action. But we can talk more about it in detail. I do appreciate your incredible level of detail and the communications you sent to us, and thank you. Although I don't see you any longer on the board. Is she still here? Well, anyway, thank you, Kara Sanford. Seeing no other hands for public comment, we will close public comment. Thank you, everyone. Town Administrator report. Town Administrator, please report.
All right, well, this is Kate Hodges, Town Administrator. I'd like to introduce Kelly Dolan today, live and in person.
You come up, you have
You'd like to come up to the podium, Kelly. Kelly is our new Director of Health and Human Services. Today is day 6, and I think we can say Kelly has hit the ground running, had a revolving door of persons in and out of the community center, and just wanted to, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So quick announcement, thank you guys for having me. Incredibly happy to be here, meet everybody. For those of you who have had taken the time to come see me, I hope to see you soon. And those who haven't, please feel free to reach out. And thank you to Kate and everyone else for being so warm and welcoming so far. We're going to be doing a lot in the coming months, but I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to make sure I get everything underway so we can have a strong foundation to build from there. So thank you very much.
We appreciate it, Kelly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Welcome to town.
Okay, well, so I wanted to provide some budget updates. I'm going to share my screen. I only provided it in document form for you all in case the angle of the television.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I have a cold that doesn't seem to want to quit on me, so if I'm coughing, I'm sorry. All right, so essentially, what you're looking at here, I'm just going to go over verbally some brief FY23 budget updates, so that's the fiscal year that we are currently in. Thus far, we've spent about 20% of our budget, so we are definitely on target for our projected goals relative to both collections and expenditures. Any taxes that have not been collected, both excise tax and property taxes, will be published effective next week. So if anybody has any questions relative to that, I would suggest that they call the Collector Treasurer's office, and they can certainly help you. Prior to my time, town meeting voted to use about $400,000 in free cash at a special town meeting in FY22 to balance the town budget, and this past May, another $800,000 was voted in free cash to balance this current year's budget that we're in. So this leaves us with a net cash of just about $1 million in free cash as we close out FY21. It's not certified free cash, as you know, because we have to go through the audit, but we're looking at about $1 million. And the reason I bring that up is because that source of revenue, whether people agree or disagree with past practice of using free cash to balance the budget, is not an option for us this year. And really shouldn't be an option for quite a few years coming. Why $1 million to persons as such as us seems like a lot of money in a town that has upwards of $30 to $40 million in expenses. $1 million is certainly not enough. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear, that it isn't a place that we can look. So in speaking for capital improvements in '24, this is a summary of the capital requests. When we go through the full budget outline, which is going to happen on the 12th of November, you'll be able to see, and certainly in select board meetings prior to that, you'll see the full build out, which isn't just this summary data, but also has all of the sheets that are combined with that, and we'll have all the individual asks. But I thought just for the purposes of just kind of bringing people into what we have here, we have between the departments that are listed on the left-hand side, as far as assets, which is including vehicles and equipment, but not including buildings, we have about $4.4 million worth of assets. The offsets were if we were to trade in value now, so it gives us a liability of about $4.2 million. As you can see, the current budget in FY23, between Chapter 90 funds and the transfers from free cash, we allocated about $219,000 or so for capital. There was about 115 that was between facilities, which included some things that were done for the library, and then some things that were done in the sewer department, and then cameras in the police department, and some things in IT. If you could see the other years, clearly FY25 and 26 far exceed anything that we've seen before, and that is because there's a discussion on the table about a very large-scale project that would be relative to the library building. And so you can certainly see that, and that would be in the facilities. Again, further broken down in more iterations of this budget. So the point of bringing this up is that...
I envisioned over 25 and 26, is that where the two numbers are so large? Yes.
Right, because that's over, well, and the fire department is looking for, this year looking to do a study on a new facility for them, and then, the proposal to go to a full build-out. Again, these are capital proposals. This is in no way binding anybody, but so we are really looking for the idea that there's been, a number of discussions regarding, tax rates and whatnot for Lancaster. And in this year's budget book, I'm looking to do a table and a document that looks similar to this one, which will show you the data for our tax rates. This chart shows our tax rates over the past 40 or so years. At its highest point in 1986, the tax rate was $22.38, meaning for every $1,000 of valuation, you were charged $22.38. In 1987, the town went through a large revaluation, which brought the town totals from $111,923,063 to $225,195,948, which caused a dramatic drop in the tax rate, which is what you can see. It's very clearly marked there. But as you can see, indicated on the graph, in the past 10 years, the average tax rate has risen about 15 cents, or in total from about $1.52 or $1.52 in total from 2012 to 2022. That is unusually low. While I know that it's expensive to live here, and we're talking about that, when you talk about the rate of rising tax rate, that's very low for the Commonwealth, which is good because it's indicative of smart growth. But I think that, when we start looking at what is a reasonable amount to raise, certainly to get over the hump for the level of service that the community needs and the level of students that we have here that we need to educate, $1.52 over, the course of 11 or 12 years probably isn't going to be really sustainable. Lancaster hasn't budgeted for capital improvements within the levy, so within the amount that we are allowed to tax, meaning using bona fide tax dollars for well more than a decade. As a matter of fact, just looking back at annual reports, I can't find the last time since 1996 that there was a budgeted amount within the levy. So if this continues, our assets are just going to further erode. And so I think that we need to start talking about a community mindset where, you know, we're allocating dollars to the right things and we're being responsible with the things that we're purchasing. So if we're going to upgrade a building, like I know that Prescott, for example, was upgraded, we need to make sure that we're allocating dollars to maintain it. I think it would be similar to the way that you think about your own home or your vehicles or anything else. So the town really does need to allocate to capital infrastructure. Things when you're talking about 1.2, 1.5 million, that isn't something that we would be able to allocate within the tax levy. But I don't think that it is difficult to come up with some number between $175,000 to $250,000 a year that are allocated throughout town to ensure that we have our buildings maintained appropriately, that we have the vehicles and the equipment maintained appropriately, and then any other incidentals, including ADA improvements and boilers and things like that. So I am bringing this up not for a shock and awe value, but because I think that it's important to start the conversation about what does an increase in our taxes over and above what we currently have, which is $19.45, look like per household. These are just for illustrative purposes. I'm not proposing that we do this, but again, it's to start a discussion. I think in the near future, like I said, we're going to have to be talking about these increases, and so these are the rates that we're talking about. I did an increase in the average household for a $500,000 increase in the total budget, $750,000, $1 million, and then $1.5 million. As you can see, you know, to some people, they may look at this and think that it isn't significant, others it is significant. And so I think that that's a very real discussion that we need to talk about when we start talking about, number one, our tax rate, number two, if we're gonna have a greater commercial base, whether that tax rate is gonna be different than the residential, and then the senior tax means tested. I think that there is a very real problem with people not being able to age in place, so we need to sort of market those two things and weigh those two things against one another. But again, with only $1 million left in free cash is not a mechanism for a budget supplementation, and so I wanted to show the tax burden and basically be able to sort of outline that as a primer as we get into some of the more nitty-gritty of what the budgets are. I'm assuming there's going to be plenty of questions, and you know, further discussion is definitely warranted, but I at least wanted to give these to the board, and then I plan on providing them to the Finance Committee as appropriate. So, and I will ask Kathy to attach these as a supplement to the select board packet in the meeting materials so that they're online should people want to just go in and take a look at them. But again, they're not proposals, they're just for informational purposes. Questions on that before I move on?
I think it's very helpful and great context. My question, and you don't have to answer this now, but the Proposition 2.5 limitation on what we're able to increase our taxable, is that based on the 21,662 400?
Well, so we have to get a certified number for both free cash and our new growth number. So it's a bit like shooting fish in a barrel right now. I suspect that our number for the tax levy ceiling is probably going to go up to somewhere in the $21.96 to $22 mark. So we might have some room to play with in the levy, but we won't really know until we have that. So it'll be about another month.
I guess I was asking that question because as people see these numbers and do simple math, it's not a simple calculation, and so I just wanted
It is not a simple
explanation
calculation.
So we can, okay, perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I think while, you know, those of us and you all who have been involved in town government, I think it's important when we start talking about that to explain the definition of what a levy ceiling is versus the levy limit. And so I plan on creating a document that is able to do that. I don't necessarily have to talk about it at this table unless you think that that's helpful, but it certainly can put it online as a
Yeah, no, I think it's a helpful tool. I do think it's important for those watching, I'm sure everyone has, remembers Proposition 2.5, but just so everyone's clear, about 40 some odd years ago, the Commonwealth decided that no community could increase their budget more than 2.5% based on their tax levy and all that jazz, which is why Proposition 2.5 comes into play. In case you hear people talking about that, and perhaps as we're doing this, and I know you probably do this at the budget forum, which by the way, remember, November 12th at the school, put it on your calendar, there'll be a schedule, here, and here.
Don't go to the school.
This is the school I used to go to school in, so that's what I meant. This, the center school, the old high school, no, right here in the Prescott building. Put it on your calendar, there'll be a schedule of what departments will be when, but perhaps like a tool of like frequently used phrases and things so that people understand what we mean by what. Thank you, appreciate it. Any other questions for Kate?
Yes, do you have any questions?
Lots of questions. First, thank you. This is a great, not proposal, just informational document. I think everybody understands that, and we have to have this sort of basic agreement and understanding of facts before we make proposals. So, much appreciated. When you talked about 2.5, Steve, that's why we saw that tremendous decrease, because the law, in addition to capping the amount we could increase, also forced the towns to evaluate properties at fair and 100%. So it doesn't mean, and I want people to understand, it doesn't mean that people's tax bills went down. It means that their values were represented more accurately. And that is also the case with the increase that we see here and the different things. So I think most people, when they look at taxes, care less about their rate than they do about their bill. So it's a lot, the discussion has to be also around property values and the total tax bill and how it's done. So helping demystify municipal accounting is something that I'm glad that we're undertaking. I think one of the things that would help with the capital project requests, and this is a nice summary, would be to have some of the backup in there too, just some of the initial plans I know this is a work in progress as people come in, so people can sort of see what they're coming with. The other thing is I think people have been talking to me and asking about is Neshoba, which is a school that is antiquated, built in the 60s, and lots of discussion about what's happening. And I've heard different figures bantered around about what we can expect. Hopefully we can have a presentation about that. And they've been meeting diligently. So that would be a debt exclusion, which means it would be outside of this discussion, outside of this limit, but still, you'd still feel it in the bill, but it's for a finite amount of time. Would, Kate, so when you talked about leveling, putting some capital money inside the levy limit, I think that's a perfect and has to be done. We've learned that. But there are projects, for example, the library in the past have been done outside the levy limit as a debt exclusion. Is that something that we are, or should consider?
Yeah, larger scale capital projects should be a debt exclusion outside the list. So just for the general populace that doesn't know, that would mean that it wouldn't raise our levy ceiling, that we basically are doing this over and above. So, we still would be inside our own limit. It would be a kind of a separate amount that's appropriated and paid off and then drops off. Versus what I was talking about is, a regular allocation inside of somewhere between 175 to 250 a year to what we're going to call capital outlay. So those are two, so capital projects and then capital outlay, and outlay is inside the levy. So it's cash capital.
Wait, it's like, so sorry.
No, doing it inside the levy limit, smaller projects or
Correct.
regular maintenance and that kind of stuff is very important, because you're not going to see the spikes and the drops that you do. That's why people ask about wondering about the ups and downs of their tax bill. Part of it is debt coming due. So maybe also a debt schedule that what we have out would be helpful to seeing that. And the other thing is that people look at our tax rate, and I know you talked about the modest increase in it, the tax rate being 1945. What is in the past, I don't think we've historically used all of our levy.
We have not.
Right.
The problem is if you don't use all your levy,
can't.
it brings it down and you have a new levy. So
Right.
while communities are able not to levy to the max, at some point that then becomes a hindrance because you're never starting
When you need it.
from your full
Okay.
ability. So it hurts a lot to come back up,
Right.
which is the point that we're at now. I tend to be a more visual learner, so when we get more into this, I think I'll probably have something that looks similar to one of those thermometers that
Yeah.
can kind of show. If we had levied to the max, we would have been here, but since not, it dropped. I mean, somewhere in the middle it meets, but because we don't have a great deal of free cash, and we don't have hugely robust revolving accounts at this time, we don't necessarily have a lot of fat to trim.
What's the maximum rate that the state allows you as far as a tax rate? And I know you can only go up 2.5, but I'm just saying the total.
You meaning Lancaster, or you meaning generally? Because it
Generally.
varies.
Generally, I thought there was a cap from,
Well, it depends on home values, right? So they take the home values times 2.5%, and then it's usually.
yeah, I understand that. thought there was
So,
a
I mean,
tax.
there are some communities that, have $38 is their tax rate. They're very high,
Right.
but it really does vary.
I think there is a cap somewhere, but we're nowhere.
We're nowhere near that, yeah.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
No, just like, this is a really good start, thank you.
So,
Jason?
Kate, I want to kind of take a little bit of a step back, maybe for myself and for people listening. So what's the problem? So why are we discussing finances today?
My opinion, looking at it just as a first blush without digging into all of the numbers, is that we are not in a position where we will collect enough tax revenue to sustain the operation as it is today. That's a very real problem that I see. I can't articulate how much that is, but it's several hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So you also stated, I guess the question is, so why is free cash no longer an option to balance the budget when it was in the past?
Because we used what we had. We had at one point upwards of $3.2 million in free cash. And it's similar to a savings account. We kept going back to the savings account, but then not replenishing it. So we were using it with no mechanism and no ability to replenish the funds that are in there. And so we're at a point now where it would not be financially prudent to spend it any further down than the million that it's at right now.
So we had our rainy day fund.
Sure.
Then the rain came.
Yeah.
And
It needs to be
maybe the
sunny a
rain's
little.
still here.
Yeah, it needs to be a little sunny for a while
Even
for
if
us
it's raining,
to
it has to be sunny.
put some back in. Or something needs to change in our tax base.
So in the handouts here and what you shared on the screen really outlines the capital improvement plan.
Yeah, is it helpful if I bring that back?
No,
No, okay.
but, so I don't really see here the budget, I see the current budget, but is that the current budget for the capital improvement plan?
Yes, the current budget for the capital
So-
improvement only.
so
Yep,
my
this is
que-
not general fund.
Yeah, so my question is, why are we just talking about capital, why not the entire budget?
Because capital was due first from all the department heads, and I took it as a chunk. Capital is a little bit easier because there isn't any personnel attached to that.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting
The
for,
liabilities, per se.
I
Those
mean,
liabilities.
and capital is, you do it or you don't. I think this community has chosen don't, and you can only say don't for so long, and then you have buildings that will become unusable. So, capital is by far easier.
So is it fair to surmise that in your initial first pass at capital, kind of starting to think through things, the numbers aren't looking great,
Correct.
and we'll need to do something? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I won't bring any questions forward from the general budget, and we'll just leave it there. Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Alex. All right, thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. What I do appreciate is the,
I think she has one more thing.
I'm going to turn it back to her, of course, yeah. I do appreciate that this is part of a much more transparent budgeting process that you're undergoing, which I think is really, really important, because as we've as I think the questions tonight have highlighted, is it's getting people to understand why our taxes are how they are, what they might become if we don't take actions, why we're having, like, I think it's, yes, we are having these conversations because there are dire economic times, but it's also really important for everybody to understand what goes into running a town of this size, and frankly, the position that we're in. So I applaud you for your continued efforts, and go back to you for the rest of whatever you'd like to talk about.
Yes, thank you for your level of communication.
Indeed.
So in terms of recruitment, I just wanted to note that the planning director, the community, what is her title?
Community Planning and Development.
Okay. Jasmine, our planning director, has made an offer to an assistant planning director / conservation agent, and that person has accepted, which we are quite thrilled about. And so
Town goes wild.
the person needs to undergo the pre-placements, and once those are clear, we hope to bring them forward to meet the board, and certainly we would advertise that as we did with Kelly's position. So that should probably wrap up in the next week or so. We held some of the first round interviews for the recreation position today. We have several more tomorrow. We have 8 total for this round, and hoping to narrow it down to 2 or 3 for a second round. And we've received about 30 applications thus far for the outreach worker position, which closes next week. And we had probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 11 that exceeded the minimum qualifications that we put in, which was a bachelor's degree in social work and at least 3 years in community service, municipal or public community service. So Kelly will be looking at those in the next couple of days, and I know folks have asked about the town clerk, and so I would just reiterate that James Mullen is staying on through the first of the year, if not longer, getting a lot of systems in place. He works 2 days a week, but has been in the field for more than 30 years, and I am eternally grateful for sort of the things that he's bringing to light and buttoning up down there so we can make it a little smoother.
Fantastic, thank you.
That is all. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the town administrator report. On to item number 7, administration, budget, and policy. Updates regarding special town meeting, potential articles, hearings, and timelines. Special town meeting is scheduled for November the 14th.
So
Sorry, we have to vote. Yeah.
so.
Yeah, well, I assume we have to vote on that, or did we already
Are you
do
gonna put
it?
the cat back in the bag, or?
No, it's too late. Okay, so what else do we have to decide on? The warrant is still open, what are we gonna?
The warrant is still open for that. I believe that, let me just get my calendar here. We need to close the warrant at least 2 weeks before the town meeting, which is technically on the 31st of October, but since we meet on the 1st and 3rd, you could either close it on the 17th, or if you're planning on having a special meeting the week of the 24th, you could close it then. So that would be up to you all to decide.
All right. And we can decide that at our first meeting in October if we wish. Or would you like us to decide that now?
You can decide it when, well, we would want to know beforehand so that we can tell anybody
Yes,
when the
indeed.
deadline is to get any, because citizen petitions can come in up until that time.
Is everyone okay discussing it at the first meeting in October and potentially closing it on the 17th? Or do you want to keep it open longer and have a meeting on the 24th? Does anyone have an opinion? We don't have to have a discussion about it now, we can.
No, but it's probably good to get it, if we're announcing a town meeting, and it's good to announce all the details, right? Just to keep everybody informed. And I don't have a strong preference. I would say the 24th. I think Halloween might be a difficult time night to have a meeting on. Halloween on the green and all the other things that happen, so. I want to vary a little bit there.
So I asked
No meeting on the 31st.
I wasn't planning on doing that, no, yeah.
Okay,
I wasn't
that was
planning
the
on
date.
that. Yeah, no, I don't even think Kate envisioned that. She envisioned a meeting on the 17th or the 24th.
Unless you wear a costume.
No,
No,
just
thank
My
count-
9-year-old would be
count
really upset with me if I
that. Yeah, it was just count.
Well, I do love a good costume though.
Good, that's duly noted.
It's really hard to
get
toss
tired.
up.
We could have a party, we're not
Maybe you could
going
go
to,
away.
but we could have a party. So at any rate, the question, I guess, is do you want to have a meeting on the 17th? We have a meeting on the 17th, do we want to have one on the 24th as well? Or conquer this on the 17th?
17th?
I'm indifferent, so. Believe it or not.
Meaning,
Meaning, I think it's nice to have it open a little bit later.
I mean, it's been open since August.
Well, I understand. But so I said, so when I say I'm indifferent, that's fine. And I defer to Mr. Allison.
so the 17th, I think would be the fun time.
Is when you're gonna close. Okay.
Yes.
That's.
Do we need to vote on that?
date.
It is a date indeed. It'll be the
I don't
1
think
month
you need
anniversary.
to, you don't need to vote to close it until you vote to
Copy.
close it.
It's the 1 month anniversary of my birthday, so we should definitely do it on that day. When you're 51, every month counts. Did you say only?
Did I?
I think you did. We'll just play back the tape. Somebody, did he say only 51?
The fact that you called it the tape means that you are in fact.
All right, what's next on the agenda? Code of conduct complaint procedures.
That wasn't a good thing for me to say then.
That's right. Complaint procedures, administrative investigations, process clarity. So we have a code of conduct that exists on our webpage for town officials and employees, I believe, elected and appointed boards, committees, and commissions, elected and appointed. The issue, what we've raised, we've received a number of questions about if-then statements, sort of. If a complaint is made against a certain person, what happens then? And our code of conduct, although lays out with some clarity what is acceptable behavior and what is not, it doesn't lay out, at least to my viewing, any sort of process for adjudicating any of these claims or frankly coming to a resolution for a resident who raises a concern about a code of conduct violation. Unless someone can see it in there, then I can't see a process for it. Whereas we have processes for discipline and all that jazz, there's no process for acting on complaints. And so,
I interrupt on that one
you just did, so yes.
again?
Yeah.
I interrupt again?
Let me just finish my thought for just
Okay,
a second,
okay.
which is, I believe in order for the code of conduct to be as full-throatedly strong as we want it to be, which I don't even think that's the proper term, we need to have a process in place for adjudicating concerns and requests. So I would suggest that we work on revising the code of conduct and updating it to make sure that we have those provisions in place. Now you may interrupt.
Okay, so the expression that we frequently like to use, so before your time and before Kate's time.
Yes.
When we initially.
You call it the good old days, but I.
Not always. But when we adopted the code of conduct,
Yes.
there was such a process. And then we learned after so I believe that if we look to 11/20/21 version, there was some discussion about it. Although it wasn't perfect, and that's why we have revisions. One of the things that we learned, and I agree with you that we need to have some sort of proviso, because if you have a code without a method to enforce it, you may as well.
Really, just words.
Right, exactly.
It's
Nice
mere
ideas.
suggestions.
So we discovered that it was, our first version was cumbersome, expensive, not really effective to do it. Thus, the revisions, but you know how sometimes people, we go to extremes. You address one problem, and one way of addressing it was sort
Taking it
of
out
removing
entirely.
that, right? So, yes, we should have something in there, but how we do that. I
Well,
know,
yeah,
and how we do it.
I don't have the solution for how we do it, I'm just suggesting
Right.
that we embark on a process that ends in a code of conduct, and Kate, I'm wondering if there's, through MMA or through other colleagues, if you could dig in and see what we have for best practices on it. I like having the code of conduct. It gets thrown around a lot. by a lot of people, which is fine, and that's great, and people should use it. I want folks to understand it, use it properly, and have there be a method for it to do what it's intended to do, I think. Although I will say, I believe a code of conduct is there to say, here's who we are as an organization, here's the values we stand for, here's how we're gonna comport ourselves with each other, and not a document that is designed to be a cudgel from the very beginning. Maybe that's why when I first read it, and I didn't realize there was no disciplinary action in place, that it didn't hit me as much. But when there are questions from citizens and from other elected and appointed officials, it'd be nice to know how to resolve that. So I asked the board's confidence and their blessing in having Kate take a look at this and coming back with some recommendations.
So I would be in the camp to not make any changes.
Okay.
I agree with you that it should not be used as a weapon or weaponized. Conduct is different from ethics, right?
Totally.
And it's different from the law.
Yep.
And it's very reasonable that some people won't like the things that other people say. But to think that a board or a select board will be an adjudicator of that seems far-fetched,
Okay.
in my opinion.
And I
So I'm all for not changing anything and saying, resident, thank you. I do appreciate, but, we're not a judge and jury here, and we're not an executioner, right? Like, thank you. And I will pass this complaint on, but I don't know what else to say.
So it may be that the end result is that the adjudication part is to put in the code of conduct that if you believe someone's violated, that file an ethics complaint. But put language in there that makes it clear to them. And I don't know, I don't want to presuppose the result. I don't believe it's everybody's job to be the police of those things either. I do think, though, if you put a code together, in theory, someone violates that code, there is some sort of a 1, 2, 3. If you've got a code, someone violates it, there should be something to it. It could be as simple as follow the normal process of going to ethics, but I don't want to presuppose what the result would be. And, perhaps it'll say exactly what it is. Do you have any thoughts, comments?
It's a document that we worked and labored long and hard on. We put it, at the time, Jay, myself, and Jason, we sought public input. There was a lot of thoughtful public input. Sandy Charton incorporated that input, which at the time had mechanisms for violating it. So I think that there's probably a happy medium between what we're talking about. As far as the resources go, I would suggest in this case, Jeff Nutting, our former interim town administrator, had offered some help, and he helped draft this for MMA initially when it started years ago. Not our Lancaster one, but there are many templates out there. So I don't think we have to recreate the wheel. Maybe he has something to offer, or maybe we can do it. And I think we have learned from the initial one that had such a complicated, expensive way.
So
some examples would be a good idea.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear. I'm not saying we throw out the code of conduct. I'm not saying that there's a
none of us have.
I just, when you said a happy medium between our two positions, my position is just that if there isn't an opportunity to provide clarity on what to do if someone quote unquote violates the code of conduct, if there's an opportunity to provide clarity, we provide it. If not, if their standard is that people go to ethics or whatever it is, then that's what we do. But
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, so just want to provide some clarity to folks.
Yeah, maybe it's as simple as saying we are not an adjudicator.
Yeah, it might be as simple as that. Just note we expect you to behave in this manner, and
Or a
etc.
different party adjudicates it, though. Because
yeah.
a lot of things aren't going to pass to ethics, but
Right.
at any rate.
Could I just mention that the MMA one that's done, only because I was serving on the executive committee when the last one was done, they don't call it a code of conduct as much as the tenets. So they call it sort of a code of tenets. And essentially, it's what you started this conversation with, Steve, which is we believe X. We believe to do X, we need to behave in Y way. We'll behave in Y way by self-policing, period. And essentially, if you have an elected or appointed official, well, if you have an elected official that is not behaving in that manner, then
There are methods for getting.
then there are methods to explore that.
Exactly.
If you have an appointed official who's behaving in a manner that is contrary to the tenants, usually it goes back to whoever the appointing authority is, which in most cases is the select board.
Yeah.
And so in that case, you actually would be the adjudicator because it would theoretically be if somebody was feeling like their rights were violated. And not necessarily something about a difference of opinion or the way that was.
I will say, I am, whenever anything is raised about an elected official, I make the point that there are always ways to have your voice heard when it comes to the opinion of an elected official, which is at the ballot box. But yeah, so I think just some clarity, and we can look at some of those best practices and see. And I don't want to throw out all the great work that you all did in the previous board, because frankly, there's got to be some continuity and reliability from board to board, but not in all things. Which, unless we have something else, brings us to our next item. Mr. Allison, you sponsored this. I certainly can speak to the need for it. But
Yeah, so discuss the Select Board MOU Committee engagement with Capital Group. So it's pretty exciting tonight to talk about the upcoming town meeting, November 14th. It sounds like that's the day. And we've got a lot of preparation that needs work. I think, the MOU Committee has done a really good job getting very, very close to the finish line. But now that we're basically at the finish line, I'd like to make a motion for the Select Board to support me, Jason Allison, to meet independently with Capital Group and/or 702 LLC.
Need a second?
So Jason, I sometimes attend yours, and I always watch the meetings.
But before we have a
Oh, I'm sorry,
conversation.
a second, I'm sorry,
Thank you.
second, thank you. Sorry about that. Went right to discussion.
Yes.
So I sometimes attend live, and I always watch your MOU. I know there are a lot of people, very talented people who have worked with you. I know you've done a lot of work to come to a memorandum of agreement, and you have put the draft on our site for people to look at. So collectively, we had, when you and Jay and I were here, we created the MOU. I think that the charge was that you would create this committee or work with this committee and share it, which you've done, and you run a good meeting. And that group decided to elect Frank to be the spokesperson or the conduit between Capital and the committee, if I'm not wrong. So is that a change? Would you prefer, are we departing from the MOA or MOU committee as a whole? Is Frank not going to be doing that? I mean,
The
what's
scope of this is just for the board to support me having the ability to meet independently with Capital Group and/or 702 LLC.
So I see that as sort of either contradictory or complicating the negotiation, because usually
Frank's done a
everyone-
great job, and he's done a tremendous amount. He's got a lot going on with the planning board. Actually, I haven't even had a chance to speak to Frank about this. But what I can say is we're very close. And, that the draft that's online is a draft. And there's a little bit more work to do. And I'm of the opinion that the best way to get that done is to meet independently with Capital Group and move forward.
So I don't mind if you're the one that wanted to do that, but I think that the committee as a whole, because we've set out our previous board and your MOA committee have set out sort of the rules of engagement. And somebody who used to negotiate for a living, having multiple parties negotiating at the same time can get very confusing, and we learned from the settlement agreement how bad that was and difficult. So I think my thought would be that the MOU committee MOA committee should appoint you to do that.
So I can jump in here.
Sure.
So the reason we formed the MOU committee was because the previous board did not support me meeting with Capital Group 702 independently. And let's be honest, none of that's binding, right? I could go meet with them. I was just trying to be courteous to the flavor of the
Any of us
board.
could, but we.
So
yeah.
this is strictly about asking now, because we are very close, just asking for support. I could still go do it. It's not my intention to do that. Just asking for my teammates to support that in an effort to get this to the finish line. And it has nothing to do with Frank. It's nothing to do with the MOU committee. This is a select board thing. So I'm hoping that, a little added extra people time can help make that happen, but nothing else is planning on changing. And we've got a great committee on the MOU side, and continue to further that. I think there's just a little bit more work that I can help with to preparation of the 14th.
And that's what the understanding of what the previous board had put in place was why I was glad to make sure this was on the agenda and make sure we give you the authority to have the conversation. Because I do frankly think there's Jason, Kate, Victoria's has talked on some aspects, Frank, and making sure we as a community are speaking of one mind and voice on these issues is really important. But in order to make sure we're in those conversations fully, the only person who had a board prior to say that they didn't want to have them directly communicating was Jason. So this is basically saying, allowing those conversations to sort of take place. So I don't see any harm or foul in it. And to me, I think we've got a talented group of folks who are working on this. The MOU committee in particular, Victoria, Frank, everybody's been working very hard toward this for a long time, longer than I've been in this chair. And I'm excited to see how we get it over the finish line. So that was sort of my thinking and sponsoring it on the agenda. Or not sponsoring it, but saying, sure, yeah, let's put it on.
So my thought when we had the MOU committee, and we came up with that sort of hybrid version, Jason, was to try to build some public knowledge or understanding, which the meetings have been public and very engaging and so on. So you've tried to do that through the MOU and MOA committee, and I think that is helpful. I think, and maybe I'm going back to my previous hat of wearing as a negotiator, having multiple people do it, I don't think benefits the town. I think it allows for confusion from the developer and for that. In fact, last night I was really happy to watch the planning board pass the Rand Whitney project. That was excellent news. And the developer themselves, Rand Whitney's representatives, spoke about their setbacks or their difficulty that this had, that the turnover in personnel had actually stalled their project, having to go back and have multiple people to talk to, and that they were pleased to come here. Now, I will say, one of the good things about the protracted Rand Whitney, so in other words, having the people who resigned from the planning board slowed them down, and but the good news is that it's now a better project. I think everybody agrees with that after the peer reviews and after the comments from the previous planning board and this one. So it's a good one.
Can I just, because we're going to speak on the
am.
motion on the table, not the Rand Whitney.
I am, so, my style, allow me to wander a little.
I know, but we all have to go to bed.
Well, okay.
Kidding.
That sets me back. I start again.
Well, I know, but the question just is, will we allow Jason to have?
I know what the question is, and so I'm explaining.
Support, sorry.
My reason that I brought that up is because I think it's actually would be counterproductive to moving it on, is to change it midstream, unless it said, okay, the MOU, MOA board, which I wholly endorse, said, Jason, you're right, you gotta bring it home. You started this, bring it home. That would be my preference, and that if you do it, to do it that way rather than individually, and then also have the MOU, MOA committee doing it, and the Affordable Housing Trust and everybody else, so. All right, so it's not for lack of confidence, but that's the reason I would
Thank you for the feedback.
not support it.
All right. Chris Provost, we don't normally take public comment during this, so I apologize. I don't No, Chris Provost, and we're in the middle of a board vote, so we're going to move forward. We appreciate your hand being up. So there's a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor, Mr. Allison, Ms. Turner,
Nay.
Mr. Kerrigan, aye. It is 2-1-0. Okay, the next three items of the agenda, Alex, are yours. Audit Committee policy scope and charge updates, tabled from 8:16 and 9:12. Public Records FOIA request discussion, policy draft, tabled from 9:12, and then discussion and coordination for joint meeting with Finance Committee to develop ARPA spending, tabled from 9:12.
Okay, so in your inbox, belatedly, you have a document. I met with Kate and talked about the Audit Committee. She was helpful in suggesting that we, rather than having the slides that we had, the board had been given initially, to consolidate things to one document, which I did by using templates from language and discussions with the help of DLS. DLS is Division of Local Services, part of DOR. And I wrote it's a little over a page document, which is in rough scope, with the hope that Kate and yourselves would look at it and determine if this was good. I spoke to a representative from Division of Local Services who strongly suggested and said many towns, most towns do. It's considered best practice to have an audit committee. And the language for the charge reads, an audit committee is a group of individuals chosen to select the outside audit firm and determine the audit objectives, as well as attend the exit interview, monitor the progress and corrective actions recommended in the audit, and participate in the audit presentation to the select board or city town council. The audit committee shall not be composed of potential subjects of the audit, e.g. municipal managers and staff, add in parentheses for the obvious reason, but include members of the finance committee or city council, selectmen, and residents with the relevant experience or background. And then the membership, which would be unique to Lancaster, although again, following best practices, would be 2 members of the finance committee or their designee, 1 selectman or their designee. Kate and I discussed the merit of having a school committee rep on it or not, because certainly the school has their own audit and they have their own representative.
Which school? We'd have to have both.
What do you mean?
Well, we pay to
that's
Minuteman
true.
as well.
That's true. And 1 citizen at large. So I was trying to keep a small enough group so it would not be too cumbersome and large. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't even think of Minuteman. I should have thought of that. But that was this. So I understand that because this is coming into you without having the benefit of going over it, this is more for informational purposes at this point. And it talks about the selection. Obviously you want to do a vigorous selection process. I didn't realize that this was exempt from 30B, but I'm sure we would want to do an RFP, which we talked about in there. So that is the Reader's Digest version of this.
Thank you. Just seeing it now, would you mind if we put it on a future agenda so that we could have time to review it?
Of course not.
That way if there's, I believe by charge, you define it as definition of the audit committee?
Yeah, in my
Is that what
own
you're saying?
version, I changed it to definition/charge. We can call it whatever.
This just says definition here. Do I
I
have the
know,
right
I
version?
understand. You have an earlier version. We can call it, and we can
So,
sculpt
If
this.
there's, I would just suggest that before the packet deadline, for the next meeting. If there's any cleanup or stuff that you want to do, and just submit it, and then we can debate it and discuss it
Well,
at
I
the
can
next
send it right
meeting.
now, or, yeah, I guess the thing is, if we have, since we have discussed this, if anybody has anything, can I add it
I
and
literally
incorporate?
just-
No, I know. No, I'm
Yeah.
not saying now. Can anybody send suggestions now, or would you prefer to do that?
Yeah, we should probably do that in open session.
Yeah, we should definitely have the conversation in open session. So
Okay.
I would say, spend as much time as you want honing it, submit it in the packet,
Yeah, we can.
prior to the next meeting, then we should have a real
Yeah, I think
conversation
it's
about it.
pretty honed, but I will send it back to you.
Yep,
so.
that sounds great.
Yeah, if it's in the packet of the next meeting, we can absolutely go through it. That's a great idea, Steve.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. So, Kate, we have, other than review the minutes, we already have an item for our next agenda. Huzzah. Well, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Your next item is public records FOIA request discussion policy draft table from
So
9/12.
I gathered in calling around different software companies, I looked at different towns that had freedom of, just to refresh your memory, I had asked that freedom of information requests be two things. To have some sort of a document put on the website that talks about the mechanics of doing it. The state has a template about
Okay,
it.
just for the purposes of people watching on Government Nerds,
And I will,
it's
yes.
public records requests in the Commonwealth. FOIA is a federal term,
Okay.
so just want to make sure we're
So
clear.
in the, so there is, the state publishes a document, which we could just use and do it. Many towns customize that. We have a similar sort of consolidated version on our website that talks about who the public records officers are. It refers to, it's dated, it refers to Lisa as our town clerk and so on, so it needs to be updated. And I think we can flesh it out a little bit. It does, yes. At least it did today. So I think just updating that and putting in more of the how-tos. I found that other towns around us had some really nice basic, like how-to, this is how many
Sure.
days, this is what you have. I also think that as we spoke earlier about the code of conduct, this has been used a lot by a lot of people and taken up a lot of
This,
staff.
public
Public
records
records request has taken up a lot of staff time.
Sure has.
Things have been taken out of context, the responses and so on. So while it's a very powerful tool and I support the state's strict public records laws, there are software companies such as FOIA Direct, which is obviously a national company, is basically essentially a spreadsheet. And in fact, we have a software
A
in-house.
spreadsheet that does what?
A spreadsheet, so, hold on a second. We have software in-house that also has, we use now to manage volunteers, appointments, that can be customized to do this. So what it does is when somebody, and with FOIA Direct, when somebody writes in for a Freedom of Information request, they fill out a form, it automatically populates the form and said, Joe Smith wants the budget, and it gives you how many days you have, and it has a ticker that reminds the staff how long they have to do to respond at what it is. When it is satisfied, if you have a rate chart, it'll give them the rate chart automatically.
Sure.
And then it will check when it's fulfilled. I would suggest we go one step further, which people do, and I think it's helpful, to have that work product posted on that, or a link to that work product. So if people want to see what all the hullabaloo is about, everybody has the same access to the same information without having to have multiple people ask for the same thing.
So as this is a very, as you pointed out, a very common tool for people to use in Lancaster, I'm going to ask for some real specifics on this. And so if there is a proposal, as you are suggesting to do, I would love it if you can, there's nothing in the packet about it. So if you can present a proposal for how this can be done, and
So are you suggesting that I talk to these vendors and?
I'm suggesting you do whatever it is you wish to present, the proposal of what you hope to propose. I don't want it to be left up to interpretation for myself or Jason or Kate or anyone in town.
No, this was what I consider to be a policy discussion, and we had it on here, so, is this a good policy? And I know we both ran on transparency and openness, so we start there. So if I am blessed to go talk to these vendors and bring forward some presentation, I am more than happy to do that.
So I would just want to know what problem we're solving for.
We're solving for making public records requests, reducing the time and having them be treated less as a weapon, and improving everybody's access to information. So it's a win-win-win, in my
But
opinion.
so I don't know how it reduces the time since the staff members still have to do the same amount of work.
Because we've had people who have looked at or claimed they haven't had full information or something responded, or other people are interested, or some people have selected little bits and pieces of a certain response to a public records request. So this allows people to be well-informed, and I think it's going to really help in reduce the division that people have felt through these records requests.
Look, I'm all for lowering the temperature in town. I still just don't know how. I'm just not convinced yet on how that's going to do that, and how it's less work for the town employees who are
It's
then
no
going to have
more
to do. Well, they're going to have to do their work and then put it on a web page, presumably monitor that, change things, take things down.
The form of delivery.
Well, it's just an email. So,
Right, it's the
yeah.
same thing, and this is just a link to an email, the delivery. It's the same amount of work.
Right, earlier you'd suggested there was less work for town
I believe
employees.
it is, because if you have people saying, for example, we all know that we've had people who have been concerned about a certain subject. For example, if it was the Capitol Group, right, that most of the information is there on the website, but, about a certain document or meeting. One person requests it, and it's there for everybody to see.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So,
Ms. Hodges.
I understand where this is going with it, but I would perhaps ask if this is going to be something, like, I haven't been asked my opinion, and maybe that doesn't matter, but
We were coming to that.
given that the majority of the requests for public records either go through, well, actually, they almost all go through my office now, since we've taken that off of the interim town clerk. It's the FOIA Direct is only as good as the access that you give FOIA Direct to the emails. So a lot of the things that we've been asked for are emails that board members are not using town emails. So that doesn't save us any time. And I also think that sometimes people are requesting things that, I'm not sure we want to have every records. We received 197 public records requests in the past 6 months. And we've never missed a deadline since I've been here. So in 5 months, we haven't missed a deadline. Kathy is like meticulous about the lists that she has and when they are and when the 10 days are. And I'm hesitant to have this type of notion out there without a primer, because I think that it might be perceived by the people who are doing it that they're not doing a good job, that they're missing the deadlines. And I just want you to, I'm just trying to tell you that, I think when you start saying, well, we could have a software that does it when a human being is doing it, invariably they're like, oh, did I miss something? So the only things that we spend a lot of time on with public records requests are when we need to redact, which the company wouldn't do, when we need to go through confidential files, which we wouldn't give the company access to, when we need to get things off of emails that we have to rely on whoever uses their personal email to be able to give it to us, and then all of the challenges to that. So we've had a lot of people that have said, I want everything on Capital Group, and then they said, well, I happen to know that these people who are on these boards use these email addresses, and we have to say, we don't have access to those email addresses. So until we come to a point in the town where we're saying, anybody that's doing town business has to use at lancasterma.net or soon to be .gov. Until we have that as a policy, then this isn't, in my opinion, gonna give us any more than what we already have, because it relies on too many outside sources.
So to me, this seems like a solution in search of a problem. And I'm all for transparency, but to me, it just is I guess, and my point is not necessarily saying, blessing you to go talk to vendors. I'm not convinced yet that this is necessary for the town to be doing, for all the reasons that Kate far more articulately expressed than I did. But that's me at this point in time.
I wasn't suggesting that it reduces the amount, any of the fulfilling of the FOIA work, nor did I ever say or infer that it replaces the human element. That's that. It's just increases the access and the transparency, which is why I think other towns use it, and we can talk about it, and not necessarily the FOIA
But I think
directed
access-
to one company, but there's other companies.
I think our access and transparency is
Towns
pretty.
use it, because I've sat through like 3 of these I'm just curious, because the one that you had mentioned, Pepperell,
Lincoln, I don't think I mentioned Pepperell, did I?
You do.
yeah.
Did I? Okay.
But theirs
But
is just a
anyway,
link to
then
the
we'll-
state. So the state has one.
And that's right, and that's what I was saying, is I think our documents would be better off too. So I will get, I will try to refine it, because I do feel strongly that this is important, but.
If you have some other communities that
Sure.
you can
And I-
point to and try to figure
right.
it out.
I also think we can lead in transparency too, so, but.
No,
but
I know
will-
we can, and first of all, and the suggestion that we're trying to do anything other than lead in transparency, I take offense to. Yes, we can lead in transparency. My point is, I don't know that the proposal that you've suggested does that in a manner that's going to move the needle at all based on versus what we currently do. And so I think it's a solution in search of a problem. If there is a problem we're trying to solve for, we should come up with a
Well,
solution
as
that
a
does
personal
that.
antidote, I have personally have had things requested of me through public records requests that I'm legally obligated to and happy to share. And it's gone through the vetting process and the processing very aptly by the staff. That is helpful to others because people allude to it as if it was as if something, there was much more there than it was. Oftentimes, I think when people get a public records request results, they realize that there is nothing as sinister as they thought that there may be. And I think that helps to bring the temperature down.
I get that. I feel like if we're designing a tool to kill the rumor mill, then I think we should continue the process as we do it, which is by the books, done effectively and efficiently.
all by the books. I don't think anybody
So,
would-
if there's a problem we're trying to solve for, I'd love to know what that is and how you're proposing to solve it, and my ears are wide open.
Okay.
Next, unless there's anything you'd like to say on that matter?
Nope, I agree with you, Steve, 100%.
Discussion and coordination for joint meeting with Finance Committee to develop ARPA spending policy, table 912.
So I did speak with Sue Smiley, who is the chair of the Finance Committee. She said that's something they've asked and would like to do. I guess she meets with you. So if the board assents to that, then we would have a joint meeting and discuss that.
But, so I thought the ARPA spending was being done through the capital planning process, which is what we've discussed as a board before.
That was my proposal.
Yeah.
When it got brought up, Alex had said that there was a discussion prior to my time about a policy regarding how to spend ARPA funds. So I haven't put anything in any buckets, capital plan wise.
Yeah.
Nor have I even mentioned, other than what I gave you as available funds, because I'm not clear whether we're allowed to count that money in the capital or not, or, so.
Right.
And when I did mention it, at one of the finance committee meetings, Sue had said that, she was waiting to hear, so I don't know.
I don't remember
whether
any
it needs to be a
communication.
joint- Okay.
I don't remember any communication from her about that.
No, and I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that the idea came at the select board level. My understanding and from talking to staff is that people were asked to bring the board their ideas for how to spend ARPA money. And so people came or gave them to Jeff, who then brought them to the board, and it was, yeah, a long time ago. And it was much more ideas than we had funds. And so there was a discussion.
Of course, yeah.
There was a discussion about what type of projects would receive funding. My ask was to be allowed to consider it at the same time as we consider capital.
Yeah.
Because I think we have some catch-up to play on not allocating capital for the last however long I can find back.
So I feel like, and if I was interrupting you, I apologize.
No, I don't know how the two separate, I feel like the two separate policies might either say the same thing, or if they're in conflict, that might be difficult. So,
I felt.
just some clarity
I
on it.
thought we had given you guidance to do just that, which was to
Yep, I just
Look at
heard
this
something
doing-
different, so I stopped.
copy that. And you heard it different from,
This, when I brought that up about how I was gonna structure capital, it was here.
So ARPA legally belongs at this table for the decisions,
aware,
however,
yeah.
yes. However, seeking input from staff and from the finance committee, I think is prudent, right?
But didn't-
And, no, I understand where Kate's confusion comes from, because there are things that, for example, when my vote would come, and I'm often the minority and could be, to consider things like, a social worker and other, which is one of the examples that people use as funding that, obviously not part of capital.
it shouldn't be ARPA funding either. But, yeah.
Well, it is in many, many towns.
It can be, but it shouldn't be, because it's
Okay.
one-time dollars, yeah.
Yeah, well, they stretch it out over, I think they're allowed to
Couple
stretch
years,
it
but
5 years
it's-
or something
yeah.
like that, the spending can go out. However, these are a discussion that I think that we need to have in talk about what the options are for ARPA and have that. Certainly capital personally would be high on my list, because that is one-time funds, and I believe in spending one-time
dollars
funds on
one-time
one-time
things.
funds,
So I guess I'm just confused, and I wasn't here at the beginning of all this. My last conversation about this at this table was that, yes, prior to, staff had been consulted, same exactly as you just presented, many more projects than dollars. We had spent some money on a boiler and a few other things, because we were spending money on a cruiser, I remember it, because
Yep.
the chief was here, and we were spending money on a cruiser, and then we said the remaining ARPA dollars will go through the capital project.
Correct.
Unless I'm
That was
misremembering.
right, I've received two separate messages, so I'm just looking for some clarity.
Yeah, I don't, to me, I don't see why we would change that. Because I believe
It's not
the finance
changing,
committee
it's
would be
not
involved in the capital planning process at some point.
It's not
It-
changing, it's
yeah.
just discussing with them. As I said, we're probably going to come to the same conclusion, but I have sat and listened to finance committee meetings. They too have a long list of what they think ARPA should be, and I just think it should be a more, I look forward to Kate's, presentation and plan, and 90% chance that we will agree with it. I will agree with it.
Well, just to be clear, I didn't include anything for ARPA in capital because I didn't think I was supposed to.
Yeah, right.
So,
I know, so I
if
was-
nothing else comes from tonight, I just because the next meeting, you're gonna see the capital.
So I guess that's what confused, so I thought we left this table saying that you were going to we weren't gonna spend any more ARPA dollars until we had a comprehensive capital budget conversation, which would include, by the way, the finance committee, as most budget conversations do. Not necessarily in concert with, but they would know what was going on. I don't understand why we then, I guess, didn't do that.
To be honest with you, I don't disagree with that, although I would like to, and I think I was in the minority, have this more
But what
with the finance. So this got put, the discussion for the joint meeting was tabled. I didn't understand, I met with Kate, but I do think it would be a helpful idea to have it.
You didn't understand why it was tabled?
Correct.
But, well, we were here. You
I
didn't have
understand
anything to
that.
present on it, so we tabled it. You asked to
Right.
table it.
Well, no,
So
no,
how do you
no.
not understand why you?
I understand, I
Yeah.
do understand that we talked about having it incorporated into cable, so I'm not sure where the confusion comes from.
So we're all in
Having-
agreement that
having
this
enough-
should be, ARPA money should be as part of the capital planning process.
No, I was in the minority, but there was 2 to 1.
Okay,
Yeah, there was 2.
Well, I don't think anyone voted.
okay,
Let
well,
me just make that, so I
Is
don't
that
know if
helpful?
it was, well, I guess if it has to.
I didn't realize it was
I didn't
an
know it
item we
needed to be
debated.
voted on,
Yeah,
but
I
it seems
didn't-
like some direction would be helpful, that's all.
Okay, what did the confusion, where did the confusion sprout from? What did I?
So, the way that I generally had been doing the capital requests is that I would bring forth a document that has the capital request that would have everything that was asked, and then it would have a panel that says TA recommended. And next to TA recommended, it would say how it was gonna be funded. So I did have some things in there, particularly relative to the community center, because I think that that's a very
Right.
emergency need, and I had been working with John Farnsworth, who's been great about, I know that he had come forward about having a generator, and there were some other things that were necessary for that, and that might be a good use of funds. The other thing that we had talked about was some money to understand and do a little bit of a master plan for Dcam. And so that was something that I had heard, and I think I had talked to Dick Trussell, and I know he's a big advocate for that. So I removed those because I wasn't sort of understanding whether that would even be a category that I could call out, right? So I put tax dollars, either capital outlay or borrowing, and I removed the ones that were ARPA. But if you're saying to throw them back in, I will. The reason being is because, you know, if ARPA is gonna be, okay, it's not just for one-time use things, we can use it in operating, then that's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
And I don't have that direction yet. I wasn't including any ARPA funding on things that are reoccurring operational expenses.
And that's definitely a policy decision.
Correct.
I couldn't agree with it more. We received ARPA funding at my day job. We worked hard to ensure that ARPA funds were used for one-time purposes, because they're one-time dollars. When you put them into your operating budget, you rely on that number, and the following years, that number's not there. Unless you're investing in creating a revenue-generating thing that will create revenue later, that is not the business that we are in here in the town. And so that won't necessarily do that, except for perhaps investing in Dcam research, but that I consider a one-time project.
Okay.
So, to me, I guess it's my naivete that I thought we had already, this was a settled
No, it's
question.
not naivete. I think so too. I think we're walking around the same thing.
I thought this was a
I didn't
settled
understand.
question. I didn't understand
No,
why
I
we're
didn't
still-
understand. I do think, for example, in the capital planning, and I do think the Finance Committee should be part of the discussion, but they will through the capital plan, I'm assuming. I would add, or ask the board to consider to the damage that was done to the old town hall and being undermined, the least sexy building, but needs to be addressed because the water infiltration, the bricks are spalling, it's going to be a structural issue very soon.
So
No, I'm just
Yeah.
putting it out, then that's
Yeah.
a different discussion, but it has to
Yes.
come out at some point, so.
Right, no, but to my measure, like, Kate has, I believe, or at least has the ability to gather the information she needs to have the most comprehensive capital planning list to then put into that structure that she has for recommendations and make the recommendations on how we're gonna spend the dollars. It's not like she has a blank checkbook and she's gonna run around spending
No.
ARPA dollars.
Wouldn't that be
Wouldn't that be
great?
wonderful?
Nice.
So, you know, to me, this seems like I thought this was a question that's already answered, but if it requires a board vote.
So the amount that I showed you tonight was the 200 and something,
Right.
does not include
Does not include ARPA.
ARPA. If you were going to include that, the number would be much more. And I think it would be one of those things when we get into doing this year after year, we'd have to put the asterisk there that says,
Yeah.
we didn't really spend $1 million in capital.
And to be very
We
clear,
spent 200 in cash capital.
to
and
be
we
very
spent-
clear to folks at home, ARPA is not the new rainy day fund. It is not.
No.
This is not the new saving grace for everything. It is here for a reason, and we are lucky as a community to have the resources available to us. So,
well, it's restricted in many ways, so people don't use it as that.
No, I understand that, yep.
Yeah. The, so I'm glad we cleared up the confusion. And
I do think we do need a vote to clear up the confusion. so-
That would be very helpful, even if it's just for my own
Yeah,
self.
So I move to authorize Kate to put together a proposal for ARPA spending.
capital, ARPA spending. Or just, why don't we just leave it? It's your motion. It's your motion.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
Kate, does that work for you?
Yes, I guess, sorry, can I say a point of clarification?
Sure.
In the middle of the motion?
You're the
It's
town
suspended,
administrator.
right?
You're the town administrator.
So, my understanding that we're using it for sort of capital and one-time and not operational, is that in agreement?
So,
Because I do recall
Yes.
reading about the social worker need, but I think we have been able to satisfy that in another way.
yes. So, I mean, for this motion, that's not stated clearly in it. It's the understanding of this board, and it'll be reflected in the minutes, I hope. And if we, in the future, have to get another vote to clarify it, we will vote all night long to clarify things, to make sure we're spending the money as properly as we can. Would be my guess.
It's clear as mud.
It's clear, it's my favorite phrase, clear as mud. Any further discussion on the motion?
Quite general question afterwards, but no.
Okay, all right, any further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan, 300. Do you have a general topic?
Kate, I'm assuming we received our second installment, or I know it's supposed to come in this week.
Well, it was supposed to come in by the end of the month, but that's in like a matter of days, so I would think hopefully by next week.
Yeah, I think most people.
They have been pretty timely.
Yeah, I thought they
I should also note that we also received our first installment of the opioid settlement, which is not a giant windfall, but it's still a few $1,000s, and it needs to be used on things that are assisting with opioid and the epidemic, and so we are hoping to do some. I'd like to start a patient navigator program.
That's great.
Through the senior center, where we are partnering with the Neshoba Board of Health to have the visiting nurses come in and talk about medication management and medication management for, what medications interact poorly with some over-the-counter medications and things like that. So I think we'll be able
That's
to
great.
more than pay for that through
That's
it.
fantastic. Yeah, critically needed for sure. All right, next, appointments and resignations. Oh, I did not print the Tom Christopher thing, I can read out my email.
It's on here.
Is it in the packet?
I think it's on the agenda.
No, it is, yeah, no, I know, but
So,
Tom sent a letter,
Why don't I
about,
do this? Would you like me to offer a motion to reappoint James Lavalley as a member to the Conservation Commission for June 30th, 2025? And then discuss
yes.
it?
I would, well, I just want to enter before we do this, if you don't mind, because the chair of the Conservation Commission sent a communication to all of us that I wanted to read into the record. Dear Chairman Kerrigan and Select Board members, unfortunately, we have a conflict in our board meetings this evening, and I'll be unable to attend your meeting. I want to let the Select Board know that Mr. James Lavalley has the Concom's complete support for reappointment to the Conservation Commission. Over Mr. Lavalley's time on the Concom, he has made measurable contributions to the board's success and has provided insight and detailed analysis of the projects that have come before us to review. Tom Christopher, Chairman of the Conservation Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes.
So I offered my motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I'd just like to
Oh.
thank him, I'd just like to thank him for his good work. I know that they worked very hard to make the Rand Whitney project possible and a better project for the town in concert with the planning board.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 300. Congratulations, Mr. Lavalley. Your term will expire in 3 years. Next is a Council on Aging appointment from a name familiar to this board and most in town, Jay Moody, member for a term to expire 6/30/2023. Is there a motion?
I will offer a motion, but as he was a member of the Council on Aging but has not been, I believe he is, according to our policies, to be interviewed, and he is here. So is it fair to unmute him and
We
ask
can.
him?
So are you suggesting we interview Jay Moody for the Council
Well, we're
the
supposed
Council on
to
Aging?
for people who are first-time appointees. I don't know
He's
if
not a
that
first-time
counts.
appointee.
Well, he hasn't been for,
A
I know,
couple-
he's
like
been on
a year.
for.
Yeah.
No,
or 2
no, no,
years,
no,
yeah.
no.
I think he was the chair before.
Yeah, he
He
was the
was,
chair.
yeah.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Yeah,
it's your
I don't
turn.
think, you know what, I feel like we know enough about Jay Moody, unless Jay would like to say a few words. Jay, if you'd like to say a few words, throw your hand up, otherwise we'll consider all of our deep questions asked and answered. Seeing no hands, thank you for your willingness to serve. Oh, Jay Moody. Jay Moody, you're recognized for very brief but thoughtful remarks. You have to unmute yourself, my friend.
As long-winded as you like.
Yeah, I have a long history with the English standard, you know, and when I started hearing people disappearing off the board, I feel more for the people. I don't want to leave them in the middle of nowhere. And I also think Kelly, I've met Kelly a couple of times and talked to her, and I think I've got enough experience with that board to help them out. So,
Well, we appreciate your willingness to serve, sir. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Moody?
No, thank you,
Okay.
Jay. I think his perspective of being chair in the past and serving on the board, also serving on this board, are really valuable. And Jay was always a very active member in the past, so I think
He will be in the
he will
future.
benefit and help Kelly and others.
All right, thanks, Jay. You can take your hand down if you wish, or keep it up and keep us guessing. All those in favor, is there a motion?
So moved.
I move to
She just
appoint,
made the motion. You have to say.
well, she needs to,
Oh.
so I move to appoint Jay Moody in the Council on Aging, member term to expire 6/30/2023.
Second.
Any further discussion on the matter? All those in favor, I was just about to tell you what the vote was going to be. Jason?
Aye.
Felix,
Aye.
Steve, aye, 300, as predicted. Before we move on to licenses and permits, I will point out there are a number of open slots for folks in town who are looking to volunteer in your community. Neshoba School Committee has an opening, has a member who is stepping down when their slot is filled. So if you'd like to serve on the Neshoba School Committee, the Minuteman School Committee, the Board of Appeals, the Community Preservation, we have the Thayer Library Trustees, as Frank McGrory has stepped down, and the Cultural Council, and we are still looking for folks to submit for the Economic Development Committee. So all of those opportunities are available to you, great Lancastrians, should you wish to serve. So thank you very much for everybody for stepping up. Now licenses and permits. Clerk?
I will offer a motion for the use of the town gazebo, town green, this Saturday, October 1st, 2022, from 9 to 5. The Friends of Thayer Library would like to hold a music concert at the gazebo all day.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Ms. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan, aye, 300.
I would offer a motion to approve the rental application for the use of Town Hall for the Friends of Thayer Memorial Library Annual Book Sale held in the Town Hall September 27th to October 1st, 2022.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Ms. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan, 300, aye.
I'd offer a motion for the, to approve the application for a town license for public entertainment on Sunday and weekdays for the Lancaster Holiday Light Show held at the Lancaster Fairgrounds, 318 Severnbridge Road, Lancaster, by the Bolton Fair and E.J. Dean Fiesta Shows. The license operating dates, November 25th to 27th, November 30th to December 4th, December 14th to 18th, December 20th and through 30th, 2020.
21st,
I'm
December
sorry,
21st.
21st to 30th, 2022. The hours are Sunday through Thursday, 5 PM to 10 PM, Friday through Sunday, holidays, 5 PM to 11 PM.
Second.
Any further discussion?
As usual, it's just, the first year was difficult traffic-wise, then they seem to have got that down, and so I'm assuming that the police department will look at this and we'll all be good.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Allison, okay, there we go. Ms. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan? Aye, 300. Additional reminder to town folks that the Horsehead Fair is taking place this weekend at the Horsehead,
Friends book sale.
and the
Yeah.
Friends Book Sale are taking place this weekend right by the town common at the Wolfen's Church. New business, hearing none. Oh,
Yes,
There's a chair.
the bench. The bench.
oh, yes, the bench.
Yes, the bench.
Sorry, you had one thing, go ahead.
Well, just a question, because I realize that we're at the end of September, which blows my mind, but anyway, Division of Local Services, I know Jeff, and then you had mentioned, we're gonna be coming in September, October, to help us look at best practices.
Yep.
They've done that before, it was really great, but it's a lot of work for all of you. So, when are they coming?
Yeah, so they lost 2 of their town, what they're calling auditors, or the persons that come out. So Cheryl Garrity was able to make contact with them, and they're actually about a month and a half behind. And so they're looking at November, December. But we are still
Happy holidays.
ready to welcome them and provide them whatever they need.
May I sent a communication to our, in another new business, I sent a communication to our legislative delegation. New business?
Oh, okay.
Is it okay? I sent a communication to our other, ongoing old projects.
Yeah,
I apologize,
it's quite
Mr.
all right,
Chair.
it's quite all right. It's quite all right, it's your table too.
The bench,
At the bench. So, yes, in the vein of new business, the select board needs to accept a gift that has generously been given to the town, and it is a bench whose picture I am attempting to bring up, and it is not coming up.
I can get it.
Maybe we can
that-
share that?
Oh, yeah, if you can get it and share it, that would be great.
May I
you
ask
may.
a question in anticipation of your motion, or my motion?
You may.
Is that these benches are a result of many people recycling their thin film. It's been a very, very successful project at the community center, now at the church. There are other benches that are in town and on town property. Should we accept the donation of all benches from Trex and then the Shoba Valley Climate Coalition, or just this one?
Well, this is the one I'm made aware of, so,
I know,
think
it
the
just
others
came up.
were given to town departments and not,
to the town in general.
yeah, I mean, they were just kind of given to the town in general. I think moving forward, that's why I brought forward the gift policy, it would be good practice. We can certainly go back, but I don't know as if you have to, because we've sort of listed them. So, but this is the bench.
It's beautiful, beautiful.
So,
bench.
this was a gift through the good works of the Commission on Disability here in the town of Lancaster, a group of incredibly dedicated citizens who are committed to making our town as accessible as it should be for all of our citizens.
Sorry, I'm just trying to zoom in so
Quite,
you
yeah,
can see
so,
that. There we go.
yes, there we are. So as you can see, this bench was dedicated in memory of Lori Giussette Prasso, an advocate for persons with disabilities. Every sunset brings the promise of a new dawn, which is a lovely sentiment. And so we are grateful for the donation of the bench, and it is the job of the select board to officially accept such a gift. But I just want to say thank you to those who serve on that commission for the great work that they have done and continue to do, not just on projects like the bench, although these are really important. And let's be very clear, benches are important, not just because they're lovely and it's a lovely dedication to Lori. They're a real accessibility issue. If people who have mobility concerns, benches are a place to rest while they're getting some much needed time outside or exercise. They are not just a decorative piece. They're a real tool for accessibility for our citizenry. And so I celebrate not just this gift, but the effort that the commission has done to bring more benches to the community and bring more access to our community as well. So is there a motion to accept this bench?
I move to accept the Lori Doucette Brazo bench memorial.
I'll second that.
Second, is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Leslie Allison for working so hard in particular to try to make this happen. And the Commission on Disability also, who did all and continue to do good works. We've always had a very active commission in town, and we benefit from that, from our complete streets, to our playground, to our gazebo there, Jason. I will say that the Neshoba Valley Climate Coalition began and actually got the benches. So we owe them thanks too, because they acquired the bench and donated it to this.
Any further discussion?
No, thank you.
All those in favor of accepting the bench as a gift to the town? Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Ms. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan? Aye. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other new business items? Hearing none. Communications. I know I let the cat out of the bag. The very beginning of the meeting, and I know everyone ran to their journals and started writing down that the special town meeting will be held on Monday, November 14th, 7 p.m. at the Mary Rowlandson Elementary School Auditorium.
Now we reaffirm it.
Yes, we are. It's really official now. Miscellaneous correspondence and memorandums. I don't know of any. Kate, anything?
No.
Okay. Ongoing projects and old business. Liaison roles, policies, and appointments. Turner.
I'd just like to, I think we need to set a meeting, maybe you know how we talked about we're already starting on a new agenda? Before we get deep into the budget, we need to set our goals, which help inform our budget, and then assign our liaisons and policies. So if we could get that on an agenda.
So is this a budget goals meeting or a liaison role meeting?
No, town goals, our general goals that we're supposed to set according to our policies and procedures, which I think will help inform our liaison roles, which are also in our policies and
So
procedures.
so if you want to, according to our policies and procedures, if you'd like to add that to the agenda, we can do that.
Yep,
But
yep.
we'll need some backup material for what you'd like and submit it before.
For goals?
There's a proposal for what you'd like to talk
I
about.
would propose that we don't focus on goals, which is a very important task, until after the town meeting.
Yeah.
So I fully support Ms. Turner and the initiative, but a little bit of focus leading up to November 14th I think is warranted.
I would like us to get through the many items we have pending still on the agenda too. So
Okay,
I think liaison roles is a very important task that you've raised a few times. I'd just love to hone in on that, get that done if we can.
Okay. So, no to the goals, but yes to liaison?
How do you interpreting yes? I think we've
That we
had the
signed
conversation, well, I'd like to know what the liaison, this is your item, liaison roles, policies, and appointments.
Okay.
So
It was,
there's got to be
yes.
some more meat to the item so that we know
Well, the
what
meat
we're.
was just assign them as we have in the past, but, and as.
But it was some lack of clarity, in my understanding, okay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were some that were, like, there needs to be some policy considerations on what departments get liaisons, who, like, there was,
Okay.
past practices had us appointing
I
against.
think I
other-
provided
You gave-
a document at some point.
You did.
It might have been last month.
Yeah,
Good.
I can re-provide it. I just have to
We
dig it
have
up.
I think we have it.
Okay.
Division of Capital Asset
Oh,
Management.
are
can
we
do that
done?
one? Yes, I think
Oh,
we're
done
done.
with that one?
I think we're done with
Okay,
that.
so the next item is Division of Capital Asset Management Maintenance Property at 0 Old Common Road.
So, couple things on this. I spoke to Lisa Verrocchi, who's our representative from Dcam. I've also been following our legislation as it has been sitting, the legislation that we approved at town meeting this spring has been sitting at the State House and has not advanced. So I sent a communication, which I hope you've seen, if not, you will see, to Senator Cronin and Meg Kilcoyne to help, ask them to help shepherd this through. This is not unusual. There's some towns that have advanced more already, and there's some towns that haven't. So we're just in one of those haven't. And it would certainly, according to Lisa and so on, it would be prudent and beneficial for us to make sure that this advances before we really begin in earnest on this, but that we needed to.
So I wasn't on the board I was at the town meeting when this happened, but I was on the board when this happened. And the confusing part, first of all, my understanding of land transfer legislation is that it has to happen in a full formal session, and so they're not having another one of those until next year. I think it behooves us to do an awful lot of work between now and next year. Also, I don't understand why we would accept, this seems a little backwards, why we would accept land.
This isn't giving us the land, this is giving us.
But the legislation gives the Dcam the ability to give us the land.
Correct.
So let me just finish what my question is. My question is, why would we want to give Dcam that? Because by the way, once they get the approval, they're going to give it to us because they want it off their books. Why would we do that without having a plan for how we're going to use that book or that land, or what the costs associated with acquiring that land is? So to me, I'm grateful that the legislature didn't approve it yet, because I think we have a lot of work to do to figure out how we're going to use that land, what the costs are going to be to the town to use that land, to develop that land, how we're going to go about the process, etc. So I appreciate that you reached out to them. It won't get done, my guess would be in 2022, and I'm okay with that, because I don't think the town should be accepting land until we have a plan for how we're going to do it and how we're going to pay for it.
So I'm with Steve. Yeah, I don't think we have any plan, and the challenge, in my opinion, with Dcam is it's super risky, right? Like, there's a lot that could go many different ways. So, Alex, I know that you've been working on this for a while, and that's great. I think we do need a plan, and we'll have to discuss it. It's a long process. I remember the presentation that they did a year or so ago, and it's just a very involved process. So
It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed. And rest assured that this part of the legislation would not obligate us to accepting, nor should it, and I agree with both you. This is one of the occasions where we all agree that we should not be, until we have a solid plan, should not be accepting this land. The other part of my update or question to this is two things. Is that as I looked at towns of Hudson and Grafton, Medfield, although that's not a great example and so on, they all used committees and consultants to help them with some of the formal plan. We have a basic plan that came, if some of you recall, I don't know if you have a chance to see it, Steve, that won the planning contest. But this is something that we may want to look at, because it is such a complicated process to look at a consultant to help us with this. And the other thing is, we have, Joe DeRamo has offered to, and is an excellent researcher and helper to help with this.
Who is
He
Joe
has-
DeRamo?
Joe DeRamo is somebody that we has been working or helping on this for last year. He can
But
come and present to us.
Where's he
He's,
from?
he lives in Lancaster on.
He's just a citizen at large, which is fine. I just
He
didn't
was
know if I
on,
was supposed to know.
he came as a representative of the Economic Development Commission initially, but since we have disbanded the Economic Development Commission, that's how he began. He is no longer a member of that committee. Nobody is. And I have spoken to Deb Williams, who is on the Affordable Housing Trust, who is interested in participating. She's also a neighbor to this property. So I don't expect you because this isn't an agenda item per se, this is under ongoing old business. But I would seek your approval to bring them in, to talk to them, or to help them form a small, tight group to help work on
So I would
the
suggest if we're
process.
going to form a small, tight working group, we need to throw it open to the townspeople and not just handpick
yes.
folks.
Charter.
We need a charge,
or whatever.
yeah. There's some work to be done there for certain.
Sure.
So I would think a charge for a development committee like this would be important. And then we would have to throw it open to the town. We can't just have it be folks that we know.
No, these were representatives of committees, but yes, and hopefully they.
I understand that, but
so-
just to, even then
Yep,
if the
no-
charge says
no-
the
no
representatives of the
objection.
committee are on it, then fine.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
objection.
I just want to make sure that this is such a great opportunity for the town, but it is fraught with a lot of risk, and I want to make sure that we do it perfectly right.
As is everything, yes.
Not everything has this much risk, but yes, it does have, let's say, a substantial risk. All right, any actionable items on that for right now? Are you proposing you're gonna come up with a charge for some sort of a committee?
I'd be happy to.
So Alex, I would just like to confirm that the correspondence with our representatives are not obligating the town or this board or anything to any commitments.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I believe it was just inquiring on the status of the legislation.
Yes, I copied you on it, Jason, but
Yeah, it's somewhere.
it was today, so you probably didn't see it yet.
All right, well, there appears to be nothing more on the agenda unless my colleagues or, my colleague, Ms. Hodges, if you have anything further to add? Nothing further to add?
Thank you. I apologize for my coughing.
It's quite all right, you're a human being, it happens. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved, so
Second.
seconded. Okay, so moved.
All those, any discussion on the motion to adjourn?
Let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
let's discuss it. All those in favor, Mr. Allison?
Aye.
Ms. Turner?
Aye.
Mr. Kerrigan, aye. This meeting of the select board is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.